Horror is an expansive and interesting topic. It means different things to all of us. From jump scares, deep-rooted phobias, or the unknown, video games' messages can be either deep, stereotypical, or based off a popular trend. Sometimes they are very different and unable to be understood. This video will go over many of the games and common trends of their times, but it's impossible to get a true grasp without playing them yourself. The earliest horror games are a bit different from the present, yet many of them still receive sequels to this day. Often more of a shooter game than a horror, many of these games, such as Silent Hill, Condemned, Left 4 Dead, Dead Space, and Resident Evil to a certain extent, are all heavily based on combat and puzzles, usually with gory battles and events, with a final boss at the very end. This made up most of the horror games in the early 2000s, until a few games later on changed the focus of horror. The first game to do this, though not as popular as the latters, was Penumbra Overture, which had characters running away from monsters more often than shooting them up. It was also a puzzle and story-oriented game, with dark and mysterious ambiences making most of the impact of the experience. The creators of Penumbra fictional game would later make up Amnesia: The Dark Descent, which follows an amnesiac player character, Daniel, to remember his past and right his wrongs while escaping Lovecraftian horrors within the crumbling castle. These games' themes would be a large focal point in the next phase of horror games. The first horror awakening would be heavily influenced on the ideas that made up Amnesia: a deep yet unknown lore, heavy reliance on ambience, and forcing the player to run from their enemies rather than face them. Slender the Eight Pages was the first game to gain massive popularity from this, which in turn led Amnesia to gain even more attention, despite releasing earlier than Slender. Based on an unknown protagonist with a simple objective assigned, Slender the Eight Pages would begin its own trend of generating countless spin-off games, each with varying quality. Some of these games were a simple recreation of the original, with a different environment, but another, named Slender the Arrival, would have a deeper story and represent another important change, which would carry on to nearly every other horror game. This was the beginning of games having a deep, veiled, and cryptic lore, often shrouded in clues and hints within the game. SCP Containment Breach would have a similar idea on its own, however, as it is based off a website of fan-made anomalies placed into human-created facilities to study them. Most of these games had the player running away from their threats and learning little bits of information when not running away. Like Slender's popularity in creating many fan-made games, another game in the future would receive the same attention and an additional benefit of a larger mysterious lore. The second horror awakening can be divided into two main parts: Five Nights at Freddy's and its endless sequels and fan-made games, and a rebirth of puzzle-based, phobia-based horror. Five Nights at Freddy's, or FNAF for short, was created in 2014 by Scott Cawthron, who originally tried to make kid-friendly games with puzzle elements and a lighthearted story. And unfortunately, he encountered many issues, with people playing his games complaining that his characters were too terrifying. They were compared to pediophobia, the fear of dolls, and automatonophobia, fear of human-like objects. This would lead Scott Cawthron to create Five Nights at Freddy's, a game based around animatronics coming to life during the night and jump scaring you as you play as the security guard of a failing restaurant chain. The game would later reveal itself to have a deeper lore, expanded on by its many sequels released only in a few months after the last. Despite these fast releases, fans would become heavily influenced by the idea of a hidden lore, and try to expand on it in any way, with the more talented fans creating their own games based around it. The game is situated in one room, with your only defense being either doors, an animatronic mask, or audio cues. Most games utilize a camera system to monitor these animatronics, along with a flashlight. Most of the horror, however, comes from the unsettling images in the camera feed, the ambience and sound effects, and most importantly, the jump scares upon your death. The last one persists in all of the games, becoming the defining characteristic of FNAF, followed only by its lore. The other games released around this time were often puzzle-based, and many were centered around phobias, such as the fear of the unknown and PT, the fear of loss and substance abuse and Among the Sleep, and the fear of aliens in space and alien isolation, and countless others. However, a few games from the past would be shifted into the expanding multiplayer universe. Due to the growing multiplayer world within the internet, and ideas surrounding many horror games, multiplayer would become linked with horror games to create a new genre of games. Horror multiplayer games are often this format. There is one main antagonist who must kill all the players to win, while everyone else tries to complete objectives to escape. This format is especially true of Friday the 13th and Dead by Daylight, who focus on a round-based playstyle within other servers, instead of a story mode. SCP would have Secret Laboratory, which included more variables and teams, leading to a longer round length and different outcomes depending on who you play as, win or lose. These horror games are a mixed bag, with some, such as Limbo, being more psychological than scary, and games like The Walking Dead, the video game, being based on the choices you make. Some other video games include deeper themes based on a particular topic or phobia, such as arcade games based around selling your soul, or a FNAF game disguised as a child-friendly story-driven turn-based game. Many do not fit the time they were created, often making more sense if created earlier, such as Outlast, which was based more on gore and being scared to death, or later, such as Welcome to the Game, a game about survival while browsing a deep web for certain purpose. Most of these games can still be fit into horror regardless, and those that have a lasting impact have to be mentioned. The future of horror lays within a mixture of past trends, phobias, a deeper lore, ambience, and some returning to gameplay. It continues even now, stronger than ever, with the occasional sequel to FNAF, this time being in VR, similar to other games with a hidden theme and an ending you'd never think of. With more sequels and original ideas being developed, it can't be guessed what would be next in horror video games.